Hello everyone, Nathan here, and for the second time in about a month, it's Steam sale time. So today I'm here to give you my recommendations for a good variety of games that might be worth picking up. As usual, there'll be three categories: games under £5, games under £10, and games above £10, and there'll be timestamps in the description if you want to skip to any of them. As always, I'll put the dollar amount in as well in case you're watching in the US, and if you're in Europe, the euro amount tends to be the same as the dollar pricing, so don't worry about it, just check the dollars if you want to know how much it is in euros. Now, just quickly before we start, this is a different set of recommendations from last time, but since it's not been long since the autumn sale, there will be a few games that cross over. So with that said, let's kick things off with games under £5. First up today is a deceptively interesting game from right at the start of 2016. It's Pony Island. Now, at a very brief glance, this may look to some like a cute little runner game about a pony, but in truth this is a much more interesting and confusing metagame that messes with the player's head and screws with preconceived notions of how you solve puzzles. I don't want to give too much away here, as discovering the interesting different requirements the game asks you to complete in order to advance is a huge part of the fun, but I can assure you that for just £1.31 or $1.64, you'll be getting one of the most unique and intriguing games of 2016 that will make you do and question things that very few other games will. Next up is Tomb Raider, the reboot that brought one of gaming's most famous franchises back to life. In this game, you'll get to see Lara Croft go from an innocent young woman to a much more mature, grizzled and battle-hardened survivor as she takes on a variety of challenging puzzles and enemies, including the supernatural. To say this is a 3-year-old game, the graphics still look pretty damn good, and the story alone will keep you going for around 15 hours, and that's if you completely ignore the optional tombs along the way. Now, there are some parts of this game that I wasn't too fond of, such as the Horde mode that you sort of get towards the end, but on the whole, it's a very strong game, and honestly, from a story viewpoint at least, I'd say that this game is much stronger than the recently released sequel, and at £3.74 or $4.99, I think it's well worth your money if you like the type of crazy action that games like this one offer. On to a game that I've recommended in the past now, and it's Insurgency. This is a realistic modern military multiplayer shooter that requires you to actually think about what you're doing instead of just charging in, because if you do just run in like an idiot, this game is massively punishing, as dying in one hit is commonplace. The gunplay here feels satisfying, and the game offers one of the best nighttime combat experiences I've ever had in a multiplayer shooter. One concern that you might have here is that the developers New World Interactive are currently working on a remastered version of Insurgency called Insurgency Sandstorm, which is due for release in 2017. So if you're worried about the graphics or the player base all jumping ship in the future, maybe hold off on this one. But for me personally, I've played around 30 hours of Insurgency, and with its current price of £1.39 or $1.99, I think it's a pretty damn good value proposition. So from an online multiplayer shooter to one that is definitely best enjoyed in offline multiplayer. Screen Cheat is a game that builds on the way that we all used to cheat in shooters as kids by looking at your friend's side of a split screen, as it actually requires you to do just that. Your enemy will be completely invisible on your side of the screen, so in order to figure out where your opponent is, you absolutely have to look at their screen. It's a fun and interesting concept that makes for a very different shooter experience. Now, there's not a great deal of depth here, as the number of weapons included in the game aren't exactly huge, but what is there is certainly fun and interesting, and the gameplay more than makes up for the potential lack of depth. Now, I would say that despite the inclusion of online modes and bot games that you can play in single player, you might want to avoid this game if you can't bring a friend over to play it with. But if you can, at £3.62 or $4.94, Screen Cheat is a great game to both excite and infuriate you and your friends. Moving away from the shooters, as next is the Stanley Parable. Now, you won't hear me recommend that many walking simulators, but the experience that the Stanley Parable offers is both interesting and genuinely funny at times. The game is expertly narrated and is another game that will mess with your head as you decide whether to trust the narrator or to use your free will to go against what you're being told to do. The Stanley Parable is a game that is really all about the experience, and as with Pony Island earlier, if I said too much I'd risk ruining it, so I'll just say for now that for £1.99 or $2.99, if you haven't already played the Stanley Parable, it's well worth picking up. Tales from the Borderlands is up next, and if you've played any of the Telltale games in the past, you'll have a pretty good idea of what you're getting into with this one. Some people love them and some people hate them, but what I can tell you is that if you are into that story-based gameplay and choices that you have to make to progress through the game that Telltale games offer, this is one of the better ones. Now, as with most Telltale games, the choices that you make don't seem to offer enough real impact for a lot of people. But in this case, the story and characters are among the best from the franchise in my opinion, and despite not caring about the story in the actual main Borderlands games, I found myself enjoying this one far more. It's well voice acted, stylistically strong, and the characters really make you like them. For £4.74 or $6.24, you'll be getting one of the better Telltale games to keep you going for a good 9 or 10 hours. Down now to the penultimate game for this section as we move on to Warhammer 40k Space Marine. Now, if you're a 40k fan, you're probably well aware that Games Workshop have been giving away the license to the series to almost anybody, and that's resulted in some pretty awful games coming out set in the 40k universe. Fortunately though, Warhammer 40k Space Marine is not one of them. This is a solid third-person shooter that allows the player to step into the shoes of an Ultramarine and take out hordes of orcs with satisfying ranged weapons and meaty melee attacks. Now, maybe 10 years ago I was really into the Warhammer 40k universe and knew almost everything from Space Marines to Eldar to Tau or whatever you can think of. Nowadays though, I'm more of a casual fan, but I still found a great deal of enjoyment here. To my mind, for Warhammer 40k fans, this is a must-buy. And for everyone else, it's still an extremely enjoyable game. So for £4.99 or $7.49, I'd strongly recommend giving this one a look. And finally for this section, we've got Dishonored. Now, I've recommended this game in every Steam sale video I've made, and my opinions on the game are well known to anyone who's followed the channel, so I'll keep this extremely brief. To me, this is one of the best action and stealth games from the past few years, and for the frankly ridiculously low price of £2.63 or $3.29, I think this is a fantastic deal. If you want to know a slightly more detailed version of my opinions on this game, then go back and watch my autumn or summer Steam sale videos, because it's all in there. So, starting us off in the under £10 category is going to be South Park: The Stick of Truth. This turn-based RPG captures the comedy and the characters of the show superbly as you enter the fight between the humans and the Drow Elves. And if you're into the comedy of South Park, chances are you'll have a very good time with this one. Now, the game does have the array of horrific moments and incredibly vulgar jokes that you'd expect from a South Park game, but it doesn't just lean on that, because the gameplay is actually pretty decent too. An interesting variety of moves and the active blocking and timing of attacks make combat more fun and involving than a lot of other turn-based systems, and there's a decent progression system for skill, equipment and buddies, and all of that keeps things fresh. Taking up the mantle of the silent protagonist Sir Douchebag, I think this is a fantastic game, and South Park: The Stick of Truth is currently available for £5.99 or $7.49, and if you're considering buying South Park: The Fractured But Whole, I think this is a good place to start to see whether or not you like that style of gameplay and whether or not you might be into the future releases. The Civilization 5 Complete Bundle is next, and yeah, I mentioned this last time, and sure, Civ 6 is out, but with all the expansions included and coming in at around £30 cheaper than Civilization 6, I feel that the Complete Bundle for Civ 5 is a fantastic option. The extra content that you get with the bundle actually adds a lot into the game that you might not expect from most DLC, and building up your civilization's technology, army and land is extremely satisfying as you expand into a major world superpower with nuclear capabilities. And I strongly recommend that after you've won the game, just for fun, go and blow up another civilization's major city with a nuke. It's just great fun. Now, there is the option to play multiplayer, but for me the true enjoyment comes from pitting your wits against the AI and seeing if you can outplay its vast array of historical leaders and empires. This game isn't intended to be an accurate representation of history, more a look at what could have happened had you been in charge, and maybe you'll have planes in the 1300s or something crazy like that, and some people would complain about that, but for me it's those sort of crazy things that make this game fun. Now, I have struggled to find the dollar pricing for this one, so I apologise that this is the only game in the list that doesn't have that, but at £8.06, this is a game that can potentially offer hundreds of hours of fun, and for me is well worth it, especially if you haven't picked up Civ 6 yet. So from a civilization builder to a city builder as we come to Cities Skylines. This is the game that the latest SimCity should have been, in my opinion. The game makes you manage all the needs of your population, from food and water to healthcare and education, and truly allows you to control how your city develops, from a small rural town to a massive metropolis. As I've said in the past, the challenge starts to wear off towards the late game as things start to take care of themselves. But if you're really into getting the most out of everything, then micromanaging road systems and making everything as efficient as possible still offers some enjoyment. Or if you're like me, you can just make some utterly crazy bridge systems to see how it messes everything up. Up until that point though in the late game where you either micromanage or do something crazy, the challenges keep coming at you quick enough to keep you engaged with the game, and seeing your town grow is just incredibly satisfying. Coming in at £5.74 or $7.49, if you're into city building games or even just like to play God every now and again, I feel that Cities Skylines is a superb choice. And rounding us off for this section is Blood Bowl 2, a turn-based American football game set in the Warhammer universe. This brutal game is based on the board game of the same name and allows the player to not only pass and tackle like you'd expect, but also foul, injure, knock out, and even kill your opponents. Now, dice rolling and RNG do play a major part in this game, and if you're not into that sort of thing, this might be one to avoid. But for me at least, the combination of the setting and the tactical gameplay makes for a strong experience, and the wide variety of races, each with different strengths and weaknesses, give the game a decent amount of depth. Plus, there's a pretty strong campaign mode that sees you controlling a team of underdogs as the game throws different scenarios at you. So for £8.74 or $11.24, I think Blood Bowl 2 is worth a try. On to the final section now then, and we're going to kick things off with Doom. Now, I think a lot of you probably predicted this game would be on the list because it is a superb game at a great price. This fast-paced demon-killing FPS will be on many critics' Game of the Year lists, and as I said in my autumn sale recommendations, I'm amazed at just how far the price has dropped in such a short space of time. I mean, this game is only around 7 months old, and it's down to £13.19 or $19.79, and in my opinion it's more than worth it. Doom offers one of the most enjoyable single-player campaigns in years, and has a decent multiplayer mode and snap map or creative mode thrown into the bargain. Honestly, there's not much to complain about with this one, and if you're in any way into shooters, then this deliciously gory option is possibly the best deal of the entire Steam winter sale. Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain is next, and this open world stealth game offers around 45 hours of infiltration, supernatural beings, and yes, cardboard boxes. It even has little added extras like the ability to rescue animals and bring them back to your massive home base to create your own zoo. Now personally, I never actually finished this one because the second half of the game doesn't seem as polished or interesting as the first half, but nonetheless, what I did play through was some of the best stealth gameplay I've played in a long time. And the sheer amount of content that the open world desert and more green Africa settings offer, along with the progression systems involved in the game, makes it well worth the £14.99 or $23.99 price tag. Although you may want to watch a little bit of a lore video before you start playing just so you actually have any idea of what's going on, because the game doesn't exactly give you that information up front. On to the final game then, and I've gone for The Witcher 3 Game of the Year Edition, which offers not just the base game, but both of the massive expansions, Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine 2. Now both of these expansions could easily be released as full games on their own, and to my mind would still easily be worth the price. The Witcher 3 immerses you in a fantasy land of monsters, puts you in the shoes of sword-wielding Witcher Geralt of Rivia, and sends you off into its massive open world to find your own way. Sure, there is a main story, but you're probably going to want to take up some contracts, or do some side quests, or even just explore the world a bit before you take on the trivial matter of saving your friend and former pupil. The impact that your choices and your character have on this world make it a truly immersive experience, and I honestly feel as though this is one of my favourite games ever. And with hundreds of hours of content here, coming in at £20.99 or $29.99, it may be the most expensive game on this list, but in my opinion, it more than justifies the price. It looks great, plays great, and offers some fantastic story content. So if you're in any way into the fantasy worlds of Tolkien or games like Skyrim, then I would strongly recommend giving The Witcher 3 Game of the Year Edition a look. So that's about it for today, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it at all helpful, I'd be very grateful if you'd click that like button down below. Let me know what games you've picked up in the comments, and subscribe for more like this if you haven't already. Anyway, I've been Nathan, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.